Okay, in this presentation, we're going to take a look at Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire, and appreciate that Byzantium was the Roman Empire, but it was in the east. And so Byzantium first was part of the Roman Empire, but then it's going to emerge as its own civilization. So as the Roman Empire was declining, Byzantine took on a life and form of its own, which is going to continue for 1,000 years after the fall of the Roman Empire. So as Byzantium also declined, some of the Byzantine traditions of government and religion is going to spread into southeastern Europe and Russia. And Russia will eventually develop the Third Roman Empire. But the Byzantine Empire, or Byzantium, was part of the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which had been divided administratively in 395 of the Common Era. Its capital and cultural center was Constantinople, or modern-day Istanbul. It was always Romanos, based on Constantine's emphasis. It was built by the Roman Emperor Constantine. He favored the site as part for the eastern territories of the Roman Empire. Now, of course, the city itself is located on the Bosphorus Strait. It overlooks the Black Sea. So it is a classic spot because it's the crossroads of trade between Europe and Asia. And Constantinople is geographically located in Europe, but the Bosphorus Strait is 12 miles away from the continent of Asia. So, in effect, the city has a unique position of being of two worlds, the West and the East. Now, Byzantium is going to be able to survive long after the invasions that ended the last Roman emperor of the Western Roman Empire. It took on a combination of Latin and Greek heritage. The emperors spoke Latin, but the people spoke Greek. The Byzantine Empire, after the fall of the Roman Empire in 476, was considered by most people of the classical period to be the New Rome. So when we take a look at the territory of the Byzantine Empire, it consisted of numerous cities, Constantinople being the most important. And during various times, the empire held territory in Asia Minor, in North Africa, in the Balkans. It incorporated Italy, including the city of Rome. But as we will learn in later presentations, as Islam was expanding and the Germanic invasions occurred, the empire is going to lose its territory in North Africa and in Italy. The walls of Constantinople will constantly be besieged, and the empire will retain its possessions in Asia Minor and the Balkans for most of its existence. So basically, Byzantium emperors were constantly telling its peoples to wake up. It's telling its folk to wake up. And this was important, as the folk will constantly be warned about its society. During the Byzantine Empire's reign, there were very many different dynasties or dynasties. First, there were many periods of political peace and prosperity, but there was also many times of instability. And usually the instability was caused by issues of imperial succession. Many dynasties did stand out, and these were the dynasties of Justin, of Heraclius, the Syrian dynasty, and the Macedonian dynasty. And within these dynasties, there were some emperors that proved to be exceptional rulers. Justinian the Great, Heraclius, and Leo III. So let's deal with Justinian the Great. He ruled the Byzantine Empire during the dynasty of Justin from 527 to 565 of the Common Era. Now, he is sometimes called the emperor who never sleeps, because of the long hours that he dedicated to the empire at the height of its power. Hence why I wore the t-shirt, "Wake the folk up." Militarily, Justinian was able to defeat the Persians and secure the eastern borders of the empire. He also tried with some success to expand the empire's border to include former territories of the Western Roman Empire. And this included Italy, Sicily, and the city of Rome itself. But domestically, Justinian is going to emphasize Roman legal tradition by compiling the laws of the empire into what is known as Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of civil law. And this will remain a legal standard in Europe well into the 19th century. He also spent time revitalizing Constantinople. But Justinian's law code was not only a collection of laws from throughout the empire, but also a textbook of legal principles and a summary of the writings of all great jurists. And together, this corpus became the foundation on which all future law codes could rest. Especially important in the 12th century, Justinian's corpus was extensively studied, and it influenced the conduct of government and the developing legal systems of Europe. In fact, it even influenced the Napoleonic Law Code, which is still current in France. Now, the impact on political thought was profound. It granted unlimited power to rulers, and it became the grounds for absolutism in Europe. It also interestingly supported constitutionalism because it maintained that a sovereign's power were delegated to him by the people. And since power came from the people, it could be given back to them. So the idea of a modern state as an abstract entity rather than the private property of the ruler also stems from Justinian's work and has shaped the emergence of the state through the Middle Ages and into the modern era. And that is why Byzantium is so important. But Justinian also spent time revitalizing Constantinople, especially overseeing the additions to the Hagia Sophia. And this was the largest and most beautiful Christian church that became the central point of the city, and it inspired many people with its magnificent art and architecture. Now, during the reign of Heraclius, from 610 to 641 of the Common Era, the empire took an eastern direction. Unlike previous emperors, Heraclius spoke Greek, not Latin. And his entire reign was preoccupied with resisting, as we will learn later, Islamic and Persian invasions. Although he was unable to stop completely the Islamic expansion into the Middle East and Egypt, he did break Persian empire power and influence in Asia Minor. Then there's Leo III, or Leo the Isaurian, who ruled from 717 to 740. He was the first emperor of what is known as the Syrian dynasty. Unlike his predecessor, Heraclius, he was able to defeat the Islamic armies and reclaim much of the territory of the Middle East, or the Levant. Leo III also added more territory from Asia Minor to the empire. Interestingly enough, Leo III pursued a very controversial iconoclastic policy that offended Western Christians. And this started the slow division in the Christian church that still exists to this day, although for other reasons other than just the theology of icons. But Leo III, despite being a very devout enemy of Islam, was influenced by Islam's theology and hence his policy of iconoclasm. I will deal with that later on. Now, Byzantine culture and religion were almost entirely inseparable. There was no separation of church and state. Christianity, culture, and empire were intertwined, and hence the grandeur and the ceremony became part of the empire. Emperors led the Christian church just as they led the empire and the people. So this stance made relations difficult with the Christian church in the West and the Bishop of Rome, known as the Pope. And the iconoclastic controversy during Leo's reign was just one of the many periods of disagreement between the Western and Eastern Christian churches. And eventually, as we will learn later, that friction between East and West led to what is known as the Great Schism, or the separation of the church, with the Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Eastern Orthodox Church in the East. But the Byzantine Empire lasted for close to 1,000 years because of its strength in its economy. And the base of this economy, of course, agriculture. Perhaps learning from the decline of Western Roman Europe, the emperors appeared to have recognized that agriculture is the base for sustenance, and because of the geographic location of the empire, commerce and trade were significant, influencing the economy. But most importantly, the key to Byzantine wealth was the Silk Road. And we'll learn about the Silk Road in the next presentation on China, because goods from China are going to pour, goods from China and India are going to pour into Constantinople, especially before they make their way to Europe. So this made Byzantium and Constantinople one of the richest civilizations and cities of what is known as the late antiquity. Silk weaving is going to develop as one of the major industries in the empire as early as 550, and it added fuel to this massive economy of Byzantium. And this, in turn, supported the strength of the arts and learning that flourished within the borders of the empire. In art, the subject of the Christian religion was dominant. Despite the iconoclastic tendencies of the empire, icons and mosaics depicted Jesus, Mary, the apostles, the saints, and the martyrs. And there were intricate illuminated manuscripts of the Bible that were made. And just as the art was heavily influenced by religion, so was education and learning. The Eastern Orthodox Church provided schools for parishes to train priests and laity, all of which taught medicine, law, philosophy, math, geometry, astronomy, grammar, and music. Higher education was also available at one of the oldest universities, the University of Constantinople, that was founded in 850. It trained scholars and lawyers for services in the empire and the imperial bureaucracy. Some of those scholars were very important because they spent their time copying the classical writing of the Greeks and the Romans for their libraries. So the literary achievements of the empire were, again, very important. It was dominated by Christianity, but Byzantine literature focused on the salvation of the souls and the obedience to God's will. So hymns and poems are going to be written in honor of Jesus Christ and his mother, Mary. Books detailed the lives of the various saints for the people to learn from and imitate. So Byzantine art, architecture, and scholarship are going to be studied, and they're going to be imitated in Europe, especially by the Germans and the Slavs. It influenced also the culture of Islam to the east. So with an amazing amount of energy spent pursuing these religious ends, it only seems lasting that the Byzantine Empire sought to spread the message of Jesus Christ. And many monasteries and religious communities are going to be founded throughout the Byzantine Empire between the 300s and 400s of the Common Era. And later on, these monasteries are going to send missionaries to the northern lands to convert Slavs and Germans. The missionary Saint Cyril and Methodius are going to be the most successful at this type of missionary work. Around 863, Cyril developed an alphabet loosely based on the Greek alphabet to help in the conversion of the Slavs and the Germans. It's known as the Cyrillic alphabet. It formed the basis for the Russian and other Slavic languages. And this missionary work and subsequent spread of Christianity, this was the most enduring legacy of the Byzantine Empire. Basically, it converted Slavs to Christianity. So, very quickly, you are now ready to view the documentary that follows this presentation.